Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. The title of this video suggests we're discussing the Thai COVID pass. This has been discussed somewhat quietly, well, quietly is the wrong word, but not a lot. It's just sort of come to the foreground in the past couple of weeks. And I want to be clear, this is different. This Thai COVID pass, we're not talking about, quote unquote, vaccine passports in an international context. So that's vaccination documentation when traveling internationally. That is not what we are discussing in this video. We've done a number of videos on that topic, and I've discussed, I don't have as strong opinions regarding that for a variety of different reasons. But one being, it's a very different thing. When you're dealing with immigration, you're dealing with different sovereign states and movement of peoples between them. That's kind of a different, it's a different arena, and the analysis, in my opinion, ought to be different than talking about what we're talking about here, this so-called Thai COVID pass. And for those who've ever seen the film Coming to America, has Eddie Murphy. It's a comedy. It's actually, I think it's one of the funniest movies ever made. There's a great line where Arsenio Hall is playing he's playing a preacher, a reverend, and he has this great line, and it's just the way he delivers it. I will botch it. Anybody that hasn't ever seen Coming to America, go check that out. But he has this great line where he just says, "If loving the Lord is wrong, I don't want to be right." And I feel in the opposite about COVID passes. If hating the Thai COVID pass is wrong, I don't want to be right, okay? And what I mean to say is, I have a real problem, again, not with vaccinations. Vaccinations, in my opinion, again, they're a modern marvel. I've said this before. You know, it's right up there with antibiotics. I like living in an age of vaccination where, you know, we don't get polio anymore. It's really nice, you know. Go back and read about people that got polio or mumps, you know, or rubella. I mean, these were killers, you know. And COVID can be too for a number of folks. It can be deadly, especially for older folks. You know, not getting into all these statistics, but there are shades of gray with respect to different people, and different demographics react differently to different diseases. And again, I want to live in a world with vaccines. Vaccines are great. It's great technology. That said, I don't want to live in a world where people tell me I have to inject or ingest or put anything into my body. And I really don't want to live in a world where it is made incumbent upon shopkeepers, those doing business, those living their lives, where they have to check or evaluate or scrutinize their fellow persons, their fellow man, just out in the world, as to whether or not they meet certain standards with respect to their paperwork or their documentation regarding whether or not they have undergone certain health procedures. I don't want to live in that world. I also like living in a world of doctor-patient confidentiality, of medical confidentiality, privacy associated with medicine. I want to live in a world where people can, you know, make their own choices regarding their own health situation. And yes, there's a cost benefit that, you know, yes, we live the counter argument I often hear to this is sort of the social compact argument. We're all living in a society. Yes, we are. But just because we live in a society doesn't mean we give up every privacy, every notion of privacy, every notion of our basic human rights to make decisions as to what we will do within our own bodily integrity, for lack of a better term, within our own, you know, for our own health purposes. I want to live in a world where those notions are maintained as well. And this is, you know, this COVID pass, and it's called like a green pass in some jurisdictions. I've seen it called other things in other places. By the way, it's not unanimously popular by a long shot. A lot of people, I think, have a problem with this because, again, it doesn't come down to the notion of whether or not people should get vaccinated or vaccines themselves. That's not the thrust of this. It's the notion that the government gets to inject itself, one, between two private individuals and their private undertakings. That's the big one in my mind. And the other thing is that it indirectly and implicitly compels people to make certain decisions about their own health that they may or may not have otherwise made. And to me, that smacks of totalitarianism. That gets very, very creepy, when we start talking about that. Again, international travel, again, at a certain point, I think maybe you can say, well, if a disease or whatever abates, maybe that certain requirements are no longer necessary. But countries can make determinations about who they let into their country. That's an inherent notion of sovereignty, and I understand that. And to me, it's a very, the response to, well, this country says you have to get this inoculation to come, call it, just throw COVID aside for a minute. Country A says you have to get a yellow fever inoculation to go there. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, guess what? You're not going to country A. That's how that equation falls out. If you don't want to get that, don't get it. Go on. Move on with your life. Or if you don't want to get that, you're not going to go to country A. That's just how it is. They have no incumbent requirement that you do that. But people just living their lives and being compelled to carry around what basically is digital papers, papers, please. Where's your papers? And being required to produce this in mundane or everyday tasks, I got real problems with that. And I think from a legal analysis, there's issues with that. From a human rights analysis, there are issues with that. And frankly, it's just, some people use the term, did something pass the smell test? Well, for me, it's does it pass the creepy test? And this thing doesn't pass the creepy test. It's just creepy to me. You have to walk around with something that says you're okay or you're approved based on whatever. And again, once this type of infrastructure could be put in place, it could, slippery slope arguments are what they are, but it's worth, hearing out. It could lead to a situation where different criteria get put in for being able to undertake one's day-to-day life. And now it's a pass for something wholly unrelated to what it began with. And again, I don't want to get into hypothesizing too much because you get too far out on a limb and there's no real point to the analysis at that point. But for now, I just think, people can make their own decisions regarding their health. And I think that that's a good thing. At the same time, vaccines are a great thing. They're a modern marvel. That technology has saved more lives. Probably I won't say countless because you probably could count them, but as a practical matter, it might not actually be countable. Long story short, the decisions on who does what with their body, I think it's a good thing. And medical privacy is a good thing to maintain. That's a world I want to live in as well. A world with vaccines where people don't have to die wantonly and without good reason, where we can save lives, but at the same time, we can be free as well.